Great. Debs, thank you very much. And Merrill, again, thank you so much for joining and sharing. We had a really nice time with your previous book. I remember having lots of conversations about the different data quality challenges that you highlighted. It was nice to see, and look forward to a similar adventure today. Thank you for joining us. Can you present?
Perfect.
There we go.
Okay.
We got it.
Looks like it wasn't fully closed from last time, which was interesting. Okay, so Data in a Dangerous Time, subtitle, Modern Approach to Managing Data. I'm saying the modern approach because I have been at this from the beginning of time, let's just say. I went to University of Waterloo. I learned about data there, and I've been working in data my whole career. So before we had terms like data governance, I was involved in that. So I can remember how people did things in the beginning. I don't do that the same way now. I've definitely evolved, and yet I'm still seeing so many people doing it the way things were done, 15, 20 years ago. So that's why I'm calling this more of a modern approach. It works for me. I'm not telling everyone just stop what you're doing and do this, but maybe you can get some ideas from it. So, as people say on Instagram, how it started, how it's going.
Yeah.
So let me kind of introduce the three books to you and how this all came about. So as I said, I've been working in data my whole career, and I had written some articles, and I enjoy writing. Sometimes I find if I just kind of sit down and write things out, it really helps me think through what I'm doing. And so I started thinking, well, what if I write some of these lessons learned down, put them in a book? So I started doing that. But I had also been talking a bit online about these data crimes, things where people are abusing data or they don't understand it, they're using it incorrectly. So I was calling it Crimes Against Data. And I was adding these little stories to this book that I was writing. And then I thought, I can't believe this. There are so many crimes out there. And so I figured this has to be a book on its own. So I pulled those out, and Crimes Against Data was the first book that I published 2 years ago. And then after that was published, gave myself a little bit of a break. I came back to that original concept of lessons learned. And I had a date I needed to deliver to the publisher. So I gave myself a writing deadline, and then I was going to do a complete read through and then start my edits before I had to deliver it to him. And I met my writing deadline, but I was writing and writing. And when I did my first read through, I thought, this is crazy. I went overboard. This is huge. I can barely get through it. It's just too much. And I thought about what I had done, and I realized I was writing two different books. I still had my original concept, lessons learned, but I was also doing solutioning. How do we solve these problems? What am I doing with data governance? What am I doing with data quality? So I broke that apart. So I finally published that second book of lessons learned a year ago, Stop the Data Madness. So that was the original concept. So that got out there. And then, again, I took a bit of a break, and then I came back to doing my solutioning. So that is the third book, Data in a Dangerous Time. So that was just published beginning of this month, out anywhere you find books, including, of course, the publisher, Technics Publications. Now, I'm sure this isn't anything that this audience doesn't understand, but yeah. I thought it was actually a really good story to help if you need to tell people why data is so important now. everyone's talking about AI. Let's make sure we don't forget about data and data management. This was a story, I actually looked it up. It came out when I was writing the second book. So it's in that book. And what had happened was there was a man who suddenly needed to take a flight. Someone in his family had died. We all hear about how airlines have these bereavement fares. Hopefully we don't have to understand bereavement fares that often. And so he goes to the airline's website to see, okay, what do I need to do to get this bereavement fare? And he can't immediately find it on the website, which really isn't that surprising. Like I said, hopefully not too many people have to do this. But they had a chat bot, and he thought, oh, this will be great. I'll just use the chat bot. I don't have to wait on hold. He probably doesn't have much time at that point either. So he goes to the chat bot and basically gets told, okay, all you need to do, just take your flight, and then afterwards, we'll give you a partial reimbursement of your fare. So he does that, takes his flight, comes back, tries to get some of his money back from the airline, and they say no. And they say no because he didn't follow their rules. He was supposed to buy it as a bereavement fare, and he would have gotten a reduced rate. So it wasn't, we'll give you money back afterwards, we'll give you a discounted rate. And he said, no, the chat bot, told me the rules. I followed the rules. And airline wouldn't budge, so he took them to court. Now, I don't know the whole story. Maybe this guy's a lawyer. Or maybe he was flying with a big family, so it was a sizable amount of money he wanted to get back. So he took it to court, and the airline's defense was that the chatbot was a separate legal entity that is responsible for its own actions. And so they were trying to say, it's not us, it's the chatbot. And the court disagreed with the airline's defense, and this guy won. And I think what probably happened, I didn't work there, but my guess is what they did is what a lot of companies are doing. They're trying to move to AI, so they're building up these new AI departments, and they're forgetting you've already solved a lot of these problems already. You've got business rules, you've got the data. We now need to feed this into AI. We don't have to create a siloed department of people who are going to make up all of these decisions from scratch. So I think, that's really important, as you work in your companies when they start talking about AI. And the same thing applies to data. We don't need to create these siloed data departments that some people do and forget about, we've already got a lot of these rules. If we talk to people in the business, we don't need to create from scratch. So thought that was a really interesting story, and I'm sure we'll hear more stories like that as more companies do things with AI.
Sorry, Meryl. Sorry.
Yeah.
Just a interesting question there is, did the lawyer actually take download a copy of the transcript? How did he, do you have any idea on how he proved it, or?
Yeah, exactly. He got this information from the chatbot. He saved the conversation, fortunately.
Right.
So then he was able to go back to that with the airline and say, this is why, I followed your rules. I'm expecting some money back. But yeah, if he hadn't have saved that conversation, it would have been his word against, a bot. because
lately I've been hearing that records management has to deal with all of these conversations that the chatbots have. So it's like a telephone call or into a call center. It's actually a record as it gets created. So they need to be able to produce that record. But I was interested as to where they had it. And then the other interesting comment was, I'm not sure if you're aware, but shortly after this, some of the data models in like the party master data domain actually had that third level of, so under a party was individual organization, and then they added a bot. There was almost the
Oh,
first data
interesting.
model that added that support to the party master data domain.
That's interesting. I don't know if I would do that.
Because
And
it is
Because
a
initially, a
generally you
separate
lot
think of
of
legal
like
entity.
people and non-people.
It's a party, so it's more of involved
Yeah.
party. So it is, because it's a legal entity, it's now separate to that of an organization.
Yeah. Yeah, that could be. If it's
I
considered
don't,
a separate legal entity, they may have to, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't, and I don't think a lot of companies realize, even today, that
Yeah,
these chatbots are separate legal entities
yeah,
and need to
yeah.
be regarded as such. Additionally, many of the first few waves of chatbots did not save conversations, did not even give you the option to save the conversation.
Yeah,
I
whenever there's something important, I always save the conversation. I didn't trust that it was
Yeah.
going to send it to me.
I consider chatbots to be basically verbal facts,
Yeah.
Yeah, it should be.
FAQs. You
Yeah.
know, I have never found one that I have been satisfied. I've heard companies talk about how, oh, you won't know you're not talking with another human on it. Yes, absolutely, 100%. Yeah, and I've challenged companies. Show me your chatbot, and I will disprove it, and I will prove that it is absolutely distinguishable from chatting with a human. So it's like I always I dispense with chatbots, and I go through all you know, avoid all those unnecessary voice prompts and stuff, automated voice prompts. I want to get to a human, period.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it can take 15 minutes to get through all those prompts to finally
Yeah.
get to a human.
Yes. And I've made complaints about that when I get to someone. I say, do you know how long it took me to get to a human? Do you know how many? There are circuitous prompts as well, where they just, if you don't select the right thing, or it doesn't interpret your voice responses in the way it's programmed to, it'll start the whole thing over again.
Yeah.
And I have told many companies, your prompts are terrible. They're horrible. They're not customer friendly. And of course, it falls on deaf ears.
Yeah. Yeah, I've sometimes wound up in the wrong spot, and then they're trying to make me out to be the bad one. It's like, well, here's what you should have selected. It's like, well, I selected the best options based on what I was given and what I needed to get to. Yeah. Okay, this is a data management wheel that I'm using in the book. I used it in the previous book as well. I've used all sorts of wheels. A lot of companies I've worked with, they've had their own data management wheel. So I've used that. Now, if they don't have one, this is generally what I've started to use. I find that it, simplifies some things. I've got everything defined so that there's no overlap between these 6 capabilities. So this is what I've been using. So I've got it in the book. I've got definitions for each of these. So I look at data management as a discipline made up of 6 capabilities. I've got it with a little logo at the bottom, Mad. That's my logo.
Right.
Merrill Albert Data, but oddly enough, my middle initial is D as well. So it works.
Nice.
Been with me my whole life. So when I talk about this book, Data in a Dangerous Time, it's very prescriptive. Some people might call it a framework or a methodology. I don't tend to use those words, but It does go into detail on, what is data governance? How do you build a data governance organization? What are some of the pitfalls? What is data architecture? What is metadata? What is data quality? So getting into details on all of those. And so I started thinking, if I'm calling this the MAD method, what is the philosophy? And I realized I could kind of succinctly say the philosophy was focus your activities, cut the fluff, and be intentional. Focusing your activities, what I mean there is so often, particularly around data governance, someone says, this is what data governance is, and I listen to their definition and it sounds like they describe something else, usually data quality. And so then I say, okay, well, what is data quality? And I usually get a completely blank stare. And they haven't really focused their activity. They haven't put boundaries around what those things are. And we all know when we work in data management that these things are interrelated. They have to work together to be successful. But if you have to work with people in the business and you're trying to explain things and you can't even explain it yourself, how are you going to get the help you need from other people in the organization? So really try to focus what you're working on. Cut the fluff. I mean, do we have to be really theoretical all the time? There are some people who are experts in something like metadata, I think is the biggest one that I tend to see. They know so much about it and they can get really theoretical. And that the way that they're doing it, they're making sure they don't miss anything. But the problem is when you're trying to take all of that theory and try to bring along all of these other people you need to work with, they don't want to hear all that theory. It's like, just tell me what I need to do. Let's focus on it. And if this person is doing some theoretical stuff kind of behind the scenes to help them get focused on what they need to do, that's fine. But not everyone needs to know it to the level that you do. And be intentional. Know why you're doing it. We know data management is important. That's just not good enough. We need to be able to explain to people, why do we need to do this? Why does the business care? How is this going to help the company? You can't just do it just because. And even if the just because is because it was on an audit, a company audit report, you have to be able to really help the business understand why it's going to matter. And the approach that I take is data governance first. And then you can build incrementally and build the capabilities as needed. Data governance first. It's at the top of the wheel for a reason. But with data governance first, you're talking about getting the right people involved. If you can get that set up, it's typically a project that I'll do in 8 weeks. You get your people set up, and then you're set to govern everything else. You can govern metadata, you can govern data quality. You don't have to do a data quality project and it's like, okay, first thing we have to do, who's going to govern this? Or we're going to do a metadata project, who's going to govern this? You just do that governance setup first, and then you're ready for everything else. Do you need a big multi-year, multi-million-dollar data quality project or metadata project? I like to say, no, no one wants to be on that project. They're not beating down your door to be on that project. But what if you have a report that this is like really key, business really needs this report. It's got 10 data elements that no one has looked at before. You don't know what the data quality is. So, okay, let's focus on those 10, get the data quality set up for them. Probably have to do some other things first, like what's the metadata, so we know how these things are defined before we do the quality on them. But then you're slowly building it up as you need it. And it's not just, let's start at A, work our way through the alphabet because we know we have to get through everything. we have to get through it all eventually, but maybe we can kind of take our time and build it as we need it. So that's the approach I try to take. Another thing that I do talk about in the book is I think about it a lot like workshops. If you've got a good data leader, they can be leading business people through a workshop to get the definition of customer or product. They can start with gathering that information, looking at how other people in the company define it, looking at how the industry defines it, and presenting that definition in a workshop. But then you've got the right people in that workshop to really pick apart that definition and get to what you really need, as opposed to having this separate siloed data team that's going to sit at their desks all day long writing definitions and not getting the feedback that they need from the business. So workshop-based approach is generally what I take. And also if you think about it as I work a lot as a consultant. So if I'm working as a consultant, I need to know that when I leave, they're going to be able to do this. It's going to be something that continues on. They don't need me forever. I'm not trying to leave and take all the secrets with me. Success for me comes from them being able to understand it and keep it going. So if I'm bringing them along in workshops and teaching them, then it's more likely that they're going to understand it than on the last day I do a turnover and it's like, it's all yours. Good luck.
Yeah. Sorry, Meryl. There are two questions. One from Adam.
Sure.
Hey, well, so too often I have seen number one, governance be the last consideration, if it's even a consideration that I haven't had to raise myself.
Yeah.
So, which is kind of why I kind of segue in a little bit of Bob Siner's ideas on non-invasive, on how do we ease this in with minimal disruption, and the other aspect is you can't boil the ocean, right? So you have to introduce it in your most important or active area or line of business, and hammer out the issues there, then expand it out, which is another whole effort that you have to sell the company on. And the chief problem with this is usually brought in by tech managers, and they may be the leader of their silo, their tech area, but there's no one to corral them all, right? There's no one from the CXOs are involved going, this is what we're going to do as a company moving forward, and this is how it fits in with our strategy. This is how it aligns with our goals and our objectives and stuff, right? Because the CXOs don't understand it, and most of the time don't care that they don't understand it. They expect it to be taken care of by their subordinates and stuff, but there's no alignment among those subordinates. They're still usually siloed.
Yeah, so one of the things that I have in the book is I actually have a shell of a data governance organization. And that's not to say that it's something where you can just take your organization and start, plucking in names, here and there. You still have to do the work. But it's showing how it has to be, business. It's not IT. And I will say, like, I've kind of gone through all the extremes. So in the beginning, when data governance was starting out 15, 20 years ago, I think people were trying to take an IT approach. They were thinking it's data, I guess it must be, IT. And that didn't work. And when I started to kind of come up with this concept of what this data governance organization should look like, that it really has to be led by a business, I would have just business people on my org chart. And I think people wanted to fight me at times because IT wasn't there. And, I tried to explain that, IT kind of was there, but they were doing the same role that they had always been doing. So there really wasn't a need to put them on the data governance org chart. And I found that people were having such a hard time with that concept that I realized, well, I mean, they have to collaborate. So why don't I show them on the chart? So I put them in the data governance organization, but there's a business side and an IT side. So you can see your counterpart if you look at yourself where you are on the org chart. You can see who your counterparts are, and that has actually worked out a lot better. Because it's not that IT was ever not a part of it. It was just that their role wasn't changing. So I hadn't initially thought that there was a need to put them on, but it bothered people so much. So I do think there's a good thing that they're showing on the org chart.
William?
So one of the things that's worked very well for me in this, and Merrill, I like your idea of moving what can move. If there is energy there, then tap into it, right? If there's no energy in there, don't waste your time because it's not going to work for you. But there is a place that there's a lot of energy, and that's the risk schedule. So what I did is I went to the chief risk officer and I explained the whole interaction between data and everything that they do and how dependent they are on data. I then asked for certain columns to be inserted in the the risk schedule that spoke to dependencies on data. And then I would make sure that every one of the enterprise risks or project risks had a data aspect to it. When we started to do that, we tapped into the energy running on those things already. And that meant that those things could actually be then slowly introduced. And that allowed me to drip feed governance into place and also educate the organization, educate the projects, etc. But there was always this financial and risk management aspect to making sure that governance got in place. And when things did go wrong, you could actually then point to the fact that they hadn't actually addressed the data, or that they hadn't done the data quality correct before they started doing that particular piece of work. And that was very helpful.
Yeah, one of the things about me that I've just accepted the fact that not too many people are like me. I started out doing logical data modeling. So, there's a lot of people, they come from IT and then they're really interested in data, so they try to focus on data, or they come from the business side where they've, agonized over doing their work because they can't with the bad data, so they kind of get involved in data. But I actually started with logical data modeling. So from my perspective, you're doing your model, which includes all of your definitions, all of your lineage, everything is there before you take anything into production. So I would say in the beginning, we didn't have any big metadata projects or big data quality projects because we implemented it right the first time. And somewhere along the way, people went astray. And they just started putting stuff out into production. So now it's after the fact we realize, data management is a mess, but it shouldn't have gotten that way in the first place. So I think a lot of this is because we have to do catch up, making up for mistakes that shouldn't have happened.
Okay.
So sharing the table of contents with everyone. So starting off with an introduction, roadblocks we can face, and introducing the wheel. So that has definitions to go with each of the 6 capabilities. And then I've got a chapter on data management. So why is data management important? Starting out with, what is the strategy that you're following? And, some real life stories of related to data management. And then I've got 6 chapters for each of the 6 capabilities that were in the wheels. Data governance is the largest one, partly because it's so important and partly because that's generally where I focus, is what I like the most. So yeah, I wrote a lot on it. So we've got that for each of the chapters, and then finishing off with some discussion on metrics. And then, after all of these capabilities, kind of coming back to data management, what should the approach be? And there's a sample roadmap and task list in there as well. So, things that I look at when I'm doing a project, maybe you can get some ideas from it. So that's how it's all organized. And
Sorry, Meryl.
barcodes. Yeah.
So, did you not think of, I like your focus on data management, but you didn't seem to include it on the wheel. I mean, so because I
So
think a lot
sorry,
of
what was
times we
that?
realize, sorry,
What was that? What you were saying about the wheel?
you didn't include data management on the wheel. I get that it's the outer wheel, but a lot of the times we find that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts.
Well, I mean, the way I look at it, this is the data management wheel. So it's made up of these 6 capabilities.
But you've also got data strategy, which is in there. It's not part of data governance. So you are adding things to the outside of the whole. Then
Well, so because I think of data management as being made up of these 6, the data strategy, you should be looking at the 6.
sure. Okay.
Yeah, so it's not a data governance strategy, a data architecture strategy, a metadata strategy. It's a data management strategy, and then there will be components in there for data governance and metadata and everything.
Okay. We got a question from Christina.
Good morning, Merrill. I just was curious, when you wrote this book, did you include AI or AI governance? Because that's kind of where I'm at right now in our organization. I have a very, very strong data governance program. But now because of AI, we're trying to incorporate that. We're not trying to keep it separate because we don't feel that it should be a separate entity, but I kind of like your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I don't think I put it in this book because I actually put it in the previous book. And it was still more something that I put towards the end. Partly, I think, is probably because when I first started writing it, we weren't talking as much about AI. But the way I look at it is, if you understand the principles of governance, you can do it for data, you can do it for information. People talk about information management, you can do it for analytics management, you can do it for AI. So, I think it's understanding the principles of governance and then just applying it to different things. I just think it's a lot of the same concepts.
And are you seeing a lot of organizations incorporating AI governance into their data governance programs?
I feel that there's like a bit of a mix going on right now. I think some people are trying to incorporate it. Some people are trying to do something completely separate. And I think keeping it completely separate is not going to be successful because you just have to have that integration. You've got, if you think of data governance as helping the business and IT collaborate, we have to do the same thing with AI. We have to have the business and IT collaborating. And, do we need a separate data governance and AI governance and information governance when it's a lot of the same business and IT people. Yeah, I'm not completely sure that would work.
I agree. I think that we can make things complicated, but when we make things complicated,
Yeah.
then we get so far into the weeds that we aren't focusing on the solution any longer because we're too busy trying to fix all the complexities that we created from separating the two.
Yeah, and I think there are some people they're trying to get very theoretical, building this concept of AI governance, but we kind of already did it with data governance and we did it with information governance. So, why do we have to do it yet again? Let's just all get along and work together.
And Merrill, there's a question from Evans who asked, on the metrics chapter, do you break it down by component, by your eight areas, or is it a grouping? How do you?
Yeah, I do break it down by the 6 capabilities. And you can see by the page numbers, it's not huge. I'm giving a few samples. Metrics, I mean, as much as people want metrics, they always make me give a heavy sigh. Because, a lot of times when people are doing data management metrics and I look at what they've got, they're generally data quality metrics. Well, what about everything else? And, I've got 6 capabilities, but maybe someone's following another wheel and they've got a different number of capabilities, which is fine. But you have to think about, what are your metrics around all of these things? You can't just be focused on data quality. So what are your metrics for data governance? What about data architecture, metadata? So yeah, I do break it out. Just because it just annoys me so much that people only think about data quality.
And would you have metrics for your data strategy in terms of your progress?
No, because it's not a capability.
Yep. Those are all the questions.
Yeah, I don't have any particular question per se. I mean, Merrill, it's obviously always useful to have a look at different consultants' views and experiences because in reality, we're all bumping into different things, right?
Yeah.
I'm not sure any of us have a crystal ball to see what this is going to look like in 10 years' time looking backwards. But one thing I'd love to do just as a thought is to have a conversation with Sophia the robot and ask her what she thinks about it. Because one of the challenges we have is that it's humans considering this AI from an outside perspective rather than trying to get something from the other side to give us that insight. But I don't think we're going to get that right. But anyway, there you go.
All yours, Merrill. We got another question, Tariq. Sorry, Merrill.
Yeah. Hi, Merrill.
Hey.
I just wanted to understand that what is your idea behind excluding reference master data and data warehouse kind of capabilities from this wheel?
So that actually, I think got explained in the second book. So the problem I have with reference data is it means different things to different people. So that's a term I stopped using years ago. And every time I encounter someone who uses that term, I have to ask them, what do you mean? If I remember the evolution, people first started talking about reference data. And then it turned into master data management. And then there was also another time when people were using reference data, and what they really meant was code values, like a product type code. What values does it have?
Yeah.
So, people were using the same term to mean different things. So if you have to go and explain it every single time, I just stopped using it. It just didn't provide any value to me. But reference data as code values, that's part of metadata. And reference data as master data management, well, it's a data management wheel. So master data is just a subset of data. So it all falls
so you
in.
mean to say this
Now, the
overall thing
concepts of
already
master
covers
data,
that.
when we think of, having a single source of truth, that's done through your data architecture. So it's all in there, but I've stopped using certain terms because it's overlapping with other things, and I'm trying to make it a lot simpler.
That's interesting, Merrill, because I would always put reference data in the same category as MDM.
Yeah.
It's for those who know MDM, it's a standard requirement, and it can be from any of the domains, whether it's product code and specifications, whether it's customer codes and specifications, vendors, etc. It's just standardized, non-changing or slowly changing data.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't have to keep repeating. You could just use a code to reference it instead of using an entire line of record of data for it. So I'm surprised that I personally haven't encountered different usages of the term. So maybe I'm just fortunate in that.
Yeah. And I think I don't know how it evolved that way, that people started using the same term to mean different things, but they're pretty adamant that it means what they think it means. So if they use it, it's like, okay, what does that mean to you? And like I know that however they term it, it falls in one of these areas.
And one thing I noticed that you don't really, that I don't, going through the chapters and the sections of the book, I don't notice aspects of lineage and or glossaries.
Yeah, so Lineage Lineage really falls under data architecture, and glossary under metadata.
Okay, that's where you're put.
Yeah.
And I can see the relationship. I personally normally separate them a little bit there.
Yeah.
But I can definitely see the technical aspects being in. I can see the technical data aspects as being metadata versus glossary, but
yeah. So because I started my career doing logical data modeling, that model was not complete until I had all of the metadata done. I needed to have definitions. I needed to have lineage. That was all part of the model. When the term metadata came along, once I had to, figure out what it was, and it's like, why do we need a separate term for it? So I do use the term metadata just because it's widely used, but I did debate it a lot when I worked on the second book. It's like, do I include metadata when it's really actually part of something else? And I did decide to include it. But
I have to ask you real quick as a data modeler. Have you ever done a data modeler where you've actually used the comments field that's in virtually every data modeling software to put the definition of that field?
So that depends on what the tool has. Like sometimes the tool has a definition field and a comments field. If that's the case, I use the definition field and I don't use the comments field for anything because it never shows up on any report anywhere.
Those I think those would be the newer ones, the traditional ones that I've seen, or they've been newly implemented.
Adam, you'll see that the Oracle SQL developer, that was really old and it's free at the moment, and it has a definition in there. So it actually started with the definitions right in the beginning, one of the first data modeling tools.
That's interesting because all the ones that I've seen that have been built on that just had a comments field in the table. And I always stress, fill that in. It's not hard. And I have yet in 30 years, honestly, I have yet to see a database that has either one of those fields with any content. And it frustrates me no end.
Sorry, could I just ask Merrill?
I always like to put in the definition there because then I could create reports from the data modeling tool, and I knew right away if there was a blank, I forgot to put that definition in. So it was very easy to check. Now it becomes more complicated when you've got different data models for every single department. Now you're trying to coordinate them. So that's probably how the idea of having a centralized glossary came along. But then when you've got that centralized glossary, now you're doing a double check with all the data models. Have I got everything in that glossary? So there's no perfect way, but I think, you have to be really organized, make sure you've got everything covered. But it's really not something I think of as very difficult. Just use some discipline. They put those fields in there for a reason, so you can use them.
Sorry, Merrill, could I just ask a question? Are there a few more slides? Because I think we may be getting stuck.
No, the only thing left is the barcodes if people want to take them. But
all right.
Yeah, that was it.
Thank you. All right, good. Yes, William. William has his hand up as well.
So, Merrill, can you just go back one slide?
Yeah.
So data operations, storage, basically the data itself. This book deals with how to manage, control, etc. data. It doesn't deal with the other aspects such as, metadata is description data about data, right? So because it is data about data, then for me, the question around the actual data, I presume, is inferred. It's not its own space to talk about the data itself.
Not sure I'm understanding the question.
So the data itself is in data operations, storage, that sort of space. Metadata is going to be descriptive information around the data. You'll either have it in the data model, or you'll have it in Lineage, or you'll have it in those things. But the actual data itself, speaking back to, and I'm not going to use, because you've chosen not to use the terms master and reference data, but the data itself, I presume, is inferred because this is how to control and manage and govern it. It's not speaking about the object itself. Am I correct?
Yeah, I'd say that's correct. If I'm understanding what you're asking, when you get to the point where you've got you're operating with your data, maybe you're coming up with a data quality problem, and like I do have a section in here, I found a data quality problem, like what do I do now? How do I address that issue? So that kind of gets into some of the operations, if that's what you're wondering about.
I think maybe the question is you don't have data storage in as an aspect on the wheel. Where is the SQL database or NoSQL or any of those? Where is that storage and operations managed?
Well, I mean, I would say, data architecture is where you're building those structures.
Okay.
You're building your models, you're implementing your databases, but at the same time, I'm not writing, a data architecture book. I'm not trying to teach people data modeling. There's a few tips and tricks in there, but I'm not trying to, go into that because that would be like a huge book on its own. And I also talk about data retention and destruction. So we've got all this data in these databases. How long do we keep it there? Do we keep it forever? Do we ever look at it again? And data privacy, what are we allowed to touch? Can everyone access everything in the databases? So I think some of those things are in there, even though it's not meant to be a data architecture book.
I think, Merrill, one of the keys is you've written a trilogy. And so you really need to look at all three books to see the whole coverage, right? And so this is the latest book that talks mostly about governance and the various things that are around the data and how to manage it, control it, those sort of things, rather than speaking about the data itself. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, thinking about that. I mean, that's, I don't know, maybe hard to answer because you are thinking about the data because you've got, like, you create a data governance organization and now you've got people who are dealing with that data every single day.
True, but for example, you don't cover customer data or product data specifically, etc., and how you would manage that particular data within the business. You're talking generically about how to make sure that the data is taken care of, architected properly, it's secured, etc., and governed.
Right.
You're not specifically going into the actual data itself and how the data looks and how you work specifically with the data.
Right.
That would
And
probably be an earlier book.
yeah, and I would say because I wouldn't govern customer data differently than product data. When I go into how to build a data governance organization, there is part of that talks about, what if you have two things that you're governing, and I may even have chosen customer and product as the example if I were to check the book right now. And so that may look a little different within that same organization, but it's, a little piece of it is different and then everything around it is the same. So you don't have to completely change what you're doing just because you're governing something else.
Thanks, that's helpful.
Okay.
Yes. Adam?
Yeah, I'll say this with following up on that the previous comments. I use one word and I use it over and over ad nauseam, is standardization. If you're going to do it one way in one area, you do it the same way in every area.
Yeah.
You don't do it one way in one area and, oh, well, because this is different data, we're going to do it differently. No, standardization. And that's one of the most overlooked and abused areas, I think, in every company, is the lack of standardization, the lack of standards and standardization.
Yeah, and I think that's a good comment because, you know, when data governance was just getting going, I was kind of going from project to project. And, you know, I remember times where there'd be a company that was implementing a data quality tool, and they would, you know, bring me in to help get governance set up as part of that project. And then maybe I'd go to another project, they were implementing a metadata tool and they needed governance at the beginning of it. And so, you know, I'd come in there and then I'd like sit back and think about what I had done. And it's like, why am I building a data governance organization every time they have a project? I mean, that just doesn't make sense. You know, it should be done in the beginning, and then you can say, okay, we can govern data quality, we can govern metadata. We don't have to create a new structure every single time. Just, you know, one and done.
Exactly. That's you took words out of my mouth. Is start with data governance, and that will, and everything else will follow from it.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I go into a lot of detail in data governance because a lot of people just really don't understand it. They think, okay, all I need to do is write a policy and I'm done. Well, that's scary.
Yeah.
Yeah, and frankly, I haven't written a policy in years. Not to say I'm going to write one, you know, next month maybe, but yeah, I haven't written a policy in years. So that is not the be all and the end all for data governance.
Yeah, I myself am definitely not a policy writer either.
Well, there's a really important place for that, right? Because unfortunately, in political circles within the business, somebody's going to turn around and say, well, who said you can do that? And unless you've got something you can point at to say, well, this is coming from the top and you must just be quiet and get in line, you're in trouble. You're going to have your feet cut out from underneath you. So policies have their place to make sure that there's mandates and governance and that you can actually have some kind of a solid rock to stand on.
Yeah.
But they need to be maintained.
Yeah, and I actually do have a section in here, policies, processes, and standards. Talk about the differences between the three, talk about how to create them. And, you know, a lot of times when I'm doing a data governance project with a company, I will introduce policies, processes, and standards, you know, see if they want to create a policy. And, you know, for quite a few years, no one has taken me up on that policy. But, you know, I think it depends on the industry. It depends a lot on the company. Some companies are very policy driven. So if you're policy driven, then let's have a data policy so data is on an even playing field. But I've also worked at companies where they say it's going to take us, like there was one, it said it's going to take us 2 years to implement a policy. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding, you know, after I've got like this policy in my hot little hands. And then they tell me, turn it into a process and you can implement it yourself. You don't need us. It's like, done, you've got it. Writing a policy, I'm going to write a process. So yeah, I mean, that really varies a lot.
Any other questions from anyone on the webinar? Di, anything from your side?
Thanks, Howard, and thank you so much, Merrill. I hope we're not ending right now. I've loved the briefness of your wheel, the conciseness of it. And I can see how the things in my Dharma Dimbok, our Dharma Dimbok wheel, can easily fit into this. So thank you for simplifying, if you like, this whole data thing. Yeah. And I can easily see how data architecture covers MDM, data operations, and data integration. I mean, it all fits in there, and the modeling fits in there. Yeah, so thank you. And thank you, Howard, for inviting Merrill.
Thank you. Any other questions? Tariq or Mr. Bolton, anything from your side?
No questions from my side, Howard. I would like to
Okay.
thank Merrill for showing us this a very practical understanding on this data management subject. It looks like this is the minimum thing which if we take care of, other things will be automatically taken care.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tariq. And then we've got a question from Alfonso.
Yes. Okay. Thank you first for the insightful session. And also wanted to ask, how am I going to connect to all of you on LinkedIn? Because this is my first time in this meeting.
Okay, so yeah, we'll share that with you, Alfonso. We'll share some of the details when you can share some of, I'll share you with my details, and then you'll see on the post you can connect on that way. And then I'm not sure if Merrill has her LinkedIn, but I'll
Yeah,
share some of
Merrill
the details
Albert,
with you.
there's only one of me.
Yeah, Merrill Albert's at yeah. Okay, William.
So, Meryl, you made an interesting observation there, that you would put a lot of things into the architecture space.
Yeah.
Now, where some people would see architecture as the drawing of the house and all the rest of it, we've got, and this is where I agree with you, when I was doing the information architecture on the nuclear power plant, I had to do not only the design side, but I had to be on the change control boards to make sure that the changes were properly implemented.
Yeah.
I had to be part of the run of how things were running and being managed, and I had to oversee that. And so architecture, in a way, is defined a little bit, it's a bit of a space that most people just think it's, oh, that's just around the design and etc. But when you're building the house, your architect needs to be on the floor, needs to be having a look to make sure that everything works. Where the challenge was for me is that once it's in the run mode, people would say, well, we don't need an architect anymore because this is running. And that's where we had challenges around data, like the master data and all the rest of it, because somebody had to be governing that. And there's got to be a better way to hand over that from the architecture into a more run space so that it's properly taken care of. So I think it's maybe straddles architecture, governance, and maybe a couple of others need to keep the run side running.
Yeah, because I think when you're trying to implement something, you've got IT people involved, but you've also got business people involved. Ultimately the business people, they know the rules, they know how the business should operate. They do their best to explain that to technical people. Maybe they, didn't do as good a job as they thought they did. So they always have to be working together. There really shouldn't be like this complete handoff and then we'll never be involved again. I think both will be involved when you're trying to investigate problems. And even
Sure,
before
and I
that,
mean,
both should be involved in testing. Testing doesn't always get the due it should.
yeah, so data operations and storage wouldn't really be an architectural thing once it's in the run mode. You could argue that it would be under governance or operating model would be taking care of the run mode, but yeah, it's an interesting thing.
Yeah.
Any last questions? We just about on quarter past.
Yeah, I would just add this with respect to the business. Another aspect I've encountered far too often is that the business abdicates its responsibility to data. The business's attitude is data is IT's problem. And so you don't get their input. Business has to create those business definitions. that match up with the for the business glossary, that match up to the metadata aspects of the data elements themselves.
Yeah, 100% right, Adam. Now, what
Yeah.
I've done is I've resorted to referring to this as data as stuff. How far, where do I put it? How fast do I need to move it? And then data as meaning, and I put that squarely in the business space. So it is data, but it's data as stuff or it's data as meaning. IT will take care of the stuff, and business will take care of the meaning.
Yeah, and the biggest challenge though is getting the business to acknowledge that they have any responsibility over data at all.
Yeah, and so I think part of that comes when companies try to build a data team that is isolated from everyone else. And I also do not use the term data team. I think I've banned a lot of words over the years. But if you were to read through how to build a data governance organization, it's pretty much all business people. There has to be a data leader who's keeping things moving, but it's business people. So, you definitely have to go through a process of bringing them along, helping to explain to them, why they need to be involved in this, why they can't just have someone, sit off in another state, doing all this stuff. Yeah, it's the business for sure.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Merrill, thank you so much for your time and
Yeah, you're
explaining it to
welcome.
us. We really appreciate it. I see quite a few people have asked for the book. Debs, we do have a book on offer. Is that correct?
Yes, we do.
Okay. So, Merrill, I suppose the one question is, was there a question that you really liked, and we can provide that book to that person?